think what's really important is to, in your project, show the project summary task. The reason being, people will interpret the top row as being the overall for the project. So they'll look at this top row and they'll think, right, the duration of the entire project is 10 days and the start of the project is the 5th of June and the finish is the 16th of June. What may be not visible, because it might be quite a way further down, is there may be tasks that actually have a longer duration and finish at a later date. And this is the case here. This project doesn't have a duration of 10 days because in fact landscape grounds and build shed are both 14 days and they actually finish on the 21st of June. So to avoid the confusion or the potential for people to take the first row as the actual summary of the project, what we do is we insert a project summary task, which is a row 0 that appears above row 1. Let me show you. If you go to Format in the ribbon, out to the right hand side is a tick box called Project Summary Task, and when I tick that option, it adds a row 0 above row 1. Now the project summary task is a summary of the entire project. It says that the duration of the entire project is 14 days, the start of the entire project is the 5th of the 6th, and the finish date is the 21st of the 6th. So you don't have to try and find, or the reader doesn't have to find, the latest finish date. It's up there, clear as bell, at the very top in row 0 at the top of your project. And so I actually would highly recommend that you make the project summary task part of your template. Now the name that is given the project summary task comes from the project properties that we set up earlier. So to remind you about that, we went to File and we went to Project Information and Advanced Properties. And it's in there that we actually gave this project a title. Well, actually the template gave the project a title. So that's where it's coming from. If I cancel and go back, I can always edit it though. Using my entry bar or F2, I could say that the client was Bushy Park and enter. So you can easily customize it once you've got that project summary task showing. It also appears as a summary task on the Gantt, but it has a grey instead of a black color because it's a project summary task as opposed to a normal summary task. So definitely consider turning that on. Now some of the other things regarding this project, especially once you start increasing the duration and showing the project summary task, is sometimes you need to be able to zoom in or zoom out. And you've got a number of options here. You can, for example, go to View in the ribbon and there's actually a zoom group. And so what you can do here is zoom selected tasks. So if I select some tasks, I can choose this option to zoom into those selected tasks. Or I can go back to zooming the entire project, or I can zoom in or zoom out using these options here. You also have in the bottom right corner here on your status bar, you have a plus to zoom in, and you can zoom right into basically 6-hour intervals looking at the time scale, and you can zoom out, if I hit the minus, right down to every 5th year. And I can zoom in again, maybe midway. And eventually you'll try to get back to the entire project, which I'll just go for this button here because it's quicker. So you've got some zoom options which are really useful. Now things are looking rather spacious and looking rather different than my original timescale. So just to come back to how we set up the original timescale, I'm going to double click the timescale. I can see I've got 3 tiers. I'm going to start with the bottom tier. The bottom tier is in days, MTW. It's centered 1 day at a time, but it's 119%. I'm going to take that down to 70, which is what I originally had it at. The middle tier is in weeks, which is correct, and that's fine. And then the top tier actually has lost its label. The top tier also is in months, and it should be weeks. And its label should be week 1, week 2 from start. So that puts that back to being weeks, and then weeks again, but with a different label, and days, and OK. So you have got various options to zoom up here in your ribbon, plus down here at the right of your status bar, but it's very hard to often get back to how you exactly had the timescale. So it's important that you know how to double click the timescale and configure it so it's exactly the way that you want it. Now the other thing to be aware of is Project does like to round bars to whole days. So it does seem to appear that we're starting at midnight on the Tuesday, at the crack of dawn. which is not the case. We're starting at 7 a.m. So one of the things under Format in the ribbon and in the Layout button that I often turn off and make it part of my template is I don't like project rounding bars to whole days. I think it's a misrepresentation. And when I click OK, you can see that now we don't start at midnight, we start at 7 a.m. So I tend to not round to whole days, it's up to you, and I tend to make it part of the template. Also, the non-working vertical bars here are sitting behind project tasks, or subtasks I should say. What they tend to imply to some readers is that we expect them to work on Sundays because the non-working is behind. It also tends to imply that they have more time than they actually do. I would like to show you this. If you double click a vertical non-working grey bar, you can choose the option non-working time and you can tell it to bring it in front or do not draw at all. Bring it in front, which do not draw at all you use for a 24-hour calendar. But if I bring it in front, it tends to imply more clearly that I don't expect them to work Sundays and that they don't have all the time in the world, it's broken time. So that's something to consider as well. You can either double click it and say put it behind, which is the default, double click it and bring it in front. The idea then is the date format is another thing to consider with your template. So these are all sorts of things to consider. The date format is currently just day, month, year, but for some projects which have a very short project lifespan, you may want to show the time as well, or it may be that you just want to check the times. At any point, you can go into File, you can go into Options, and you can change the date format to include a time. So I'm just going to choose the top option here and OK. It now allows me to clearly see what time I'm starting and what time I'm finishing. And for some that might be really, really important. So I'm starting at 7 a.m. on most days, which is the start of my project. So be aware you can change the date format at any time, and I'm going to go back to File, back to Options, and change it back to just a date. And then I'll double click to best fit my column widths and duration as well, why not? Then there's the idea also of standard duration and elapsed duration. Now, all these durations that we've entered so far are standard durations because there's no E showing in the duration column. And what that means is a standard duration abides by the project calendar. If the project calendar says you don't work Sundays, you will not be able to put a task on a Sunday. If your project calendar says you do not work before 7 a.m., you will not be able to put a task on 5 a.m. So any task with a duration that's standard abides by that calendar. And build fence is a perfect example. That's why this bar here continues through because it's allowing for an extra day for the Sunday. But let's give you an example. I'm going to click on build shed and press the insert key, and I'm going to build fence without stopping. So I'm not going to stop at 5, I'm not going to start at 7, and I'm going to work Sundays. So that's 7 ED. E means an elapsed duration, which means that I'm working straight through, and that's why the bar is shorter, because there's no stopping, and that's why it shows at midnight. 1 minute past midnight on the 5th of the 6th, we will be building the fence without stopping, and we will be going right through the end, which will take us through to the 12th rather than the 13th, because we won't be stopping for Sunday. It is confusing, therefore, with the non-working vertical grey bars. I probably would put them back behind in this case. You can't weave them in and out of standard and elapsed tasks. Maybe we will in a future version of project, but you can't at this stage. They're either in front or behind or not showing at all. So we could even say double click and say do not draw. Completely up to you. If you want to get them back, double click the timescale, go to non-working and tell them to bring them back in front. So those are your sorts of options. I would probably colour it. Actually, I might put it behind because it looks better. I would colour it differently. I would double click this bar and I would say go orange, because anything that's working straight through, they need to clearly differentiate from other tasks. So if you put a duration in with an E, EH, ED, EW, it means elapsed. It means ignore the project calendar and just go 24/7. And that might be something that's useful. And all right, so I'm going to actually remove that task. Delete. And I'm actually going to bring this back in front. Now the other thing, of course, is sometimes we want to split a task. We might decide, okay, building the fence will work solidly that week, and then these remaining days, can we do that the week after? Because I need all hands on deck to build the shed. To split the task, we go to Task in the ribbon, and we go to this particular button in the Schedule group called Split Task. We click it, we move our mouse over the point that we want to split it, which for me is the 12th of June, and I can see that showing there, and I click. And so then I grab this second portion and I move it to the following week. So the idea here is that I want to spend some time on it that week, then I want all hands on deck for building the shed, and then to come back and finish building the fence those couple of days, the week starting the 19th of June. So you can split a task. And in fact, you can split a task several times. If I went back to that button and clicked on the 8th, I've now split it then too. So maybe a few days there, a few days there, and a few days there. That's the idea, and that's what a split task look like. If you want to unsplit it, simply drag the portion that's to the right, drag that to the left, and they'll merge. Drag the portion to the right, drag it to the left, and they'll merge again. So you can split and unsplit tasks. It's not my preference, but it is possible. You can also add notes to a task. For example, I can click on a task. Now there's a variety of ways to add notes. I think probably the easiest way is to double click and then go to notes. And in here you can type whatever you want to appear. So delivery to the site must be between 9 AM and 5 PM. Oops. It can be people's phone numbers, contact people, any sort of notes, anything that pops into your head, just type it. It can be quite extensive, and OK. And the idea here in the indicator column is a little note, which when I rest on it, it pops up and shows me the note. So you can have the note just appearing in the indicator column. Some people actually like the notes to appear in the table, so they might right-click predecessors, insert column, and hit N for notes. And then that way they're actually got this column showing with any notes that they wanted to add. And that means if they were to print, it would print the notes because it's a column. And of course they can adjust the column width and the row height to work. And if they went print, they'd see those notes printed. Other people like to split the screen. So if I go to View and I tick Details, these details show in the bottom half. If I right click here and choose Notes, then I can see the notes and I can resize how much space is dedicated to the notes, but it means that as I'm clicking on tasks, I can read the notes at the bottom. So typically in this case, you would remove this column. I'd right click this column, hide this column because it's not needed there, and I would be able to read the notes at the bottom of my screen. You can easily get rid of the details and bring up the details just by ticking that option there, and you can easily resize just by dragging that option there. So notes can be useful just to have viewing on the screen or as a column because you want them printed, or it might suffice that you don't need the details, you just need to be able to rest on the note and read it there.